In medium and larger environments, it's very likely we're going to have more than just a single administrator. So in that light, it's important to be aware of how that works and to be able to play well with others. So let's begin with clearing some confusion that oftentimes comes up regarding user accounts. We have user accounts in Gaia, which refers to the core operating system, which is Linux-based, that's running on the security manager. And that's where we have two default accounts of admin and monitor. So to do the initial configuration from a PC, we opened up a browser, and then once we connect, we logged in with admin, which is a Gaia user, on this operating system, which has full permissions by default. And using that web user interface, we're able to do the configuration of the system. And then once it's all set up, we'd download and install SmartConsole on our PC, and then running SmartConsole, we'd connect over as a SmartConsole user. That allows us to do all the bells and whistles within SmartConsole, which includes creating rules and policies, and then installing those policies over on the gateways. And initially, in our SmartConsole, we're also logging in as the user admin, and based on how we installed it, when we log in as admin with SmartConsole, it's configured to use the operating system specified password for that user admin, which happens to be the same user in Gaia. However, as we go forward, we don't have to link all that. We could create just users in Gaia on the management server, and we could also create separate accounts in SmartConsole just for managing policies and pushing policies and configuring all the bells and whistles within SmartConsole. And if we did that, for example, if we created a user like Bob, we could specify if Bob doesn't already exist as user in Gaia, we could just go ahead and create a checkpoint password for Bob as part of the checkpoint configuration, and then use SmartConsole, log in as Bob, and do whatever Bob is allowed to do. So there does not have to be a one-to-one correlation between users in Gaia that can do the web user interface and the command line interface and users associated and set up as part of SmartConsole administration. So in a previous nugget, we took a look at how to create Gaia users. And in this nugget in Hands-On Lab, I'll walk you through how easy it is to create an additional SmartConsole user called Bob, who can then be given permissions and privileges to do administration in SmartConsole. And that brings up an interesting question. What happens if we have multiple administrators with full access rights who are both attempting to make a change at the same time? Regarding editing a policy or some other object, what's going to happen? Well, there's got to be some way to help resolve that issue. And Checkpoint has not only thought about that, but they've also implemented a very elegant solution to that. And here's how it works. If admin A starts to modify something, it could be an object, it could be a rule in the policy. The moment admin A starts to modify that, there's going to be a little pencil icon that shows up in his SmartConsole regarding that element. And that pencil means that the current administrator is currently editing or making changes, and those changes by that administrator have not yet been published or made available to everybody else. However, what they are to everybody else is locked. So as admin A sees a pencil, admin B, if he's looking at that same object, would see a lock symbol. And again, the lock symbol means that the other administrator is in the process of doing something, some kind of modification regarding that. And then once admin A is done with his or her editing, they can go ahead and click on publish, and once they publish it, that lock symbol will be removed from everybody else's screen. And so now admin B can see those updated changes, and that element will no longer be locked. So in order to reinforce this idea, let's go ahead and do a demonstration of how it works. And this is also a hands-on lab. So if you'd like to log on to CBT Nuggets and click on the lab associated with this nugget, you can get the hands-on practice side by side and see the results as changes are made and elements are locked to make sure that we don't have simultaneous changes attempted on any objects in our checkpoint environment. So let's begin up here on DC Nug, and let's go ahead and launch the SmartConsole and log in as admin. So we'll click Login. And as we're logged in, down here in the bottom right corner, it shows us who we're logged in as. It also shows us if there's any pending changes. That would also show up here regarding our current session. So in order to demonstrate this, let's create another user. Let's create Bob. So over here on the left under Manage and Settings, we'll click on that. Here's our admin account that we're using in SmartConsole. And let's create a new user by hovering over and then clicking on the new icon right here. And let's create a user called Bob. And regarding authentication, we have several options. We have TACACS if you're using a Cisco environment, or we could use UDP in a Radius server if we had that set up, or if we had some kind of a one-time password system with a token, we could use Secure ID. Or if the user account was already in Gaia, like admin or monitor, we could just say check with the password there. Bob doesn't exist as a Gaia user, so we can't select that. So we'll choose checkpoint password, and we'll just define that password right here with this option called Set New Password. So we'll click on Set New Password. We'll supply the lab password. We'll confirm the lab password, and I'm going to remove the check. And that way, Bob won't have to change his password in our lab environment. Then we'll click on OK. The other thing we're going to do is let's give Bob a bunch of permissions. So from the permissions profile, if we click the drop down, we have a profile of read only, read write, and super user. So if we click on super user, that's going to give him King Kong rights within Checkpoint to do virtually everything. And if we want to see what the rights in that profile are, we can click on the little eyeball here, and that'll open up a separate window to show us all the rights that Bob's going to get as a result of being associated with the profile called super user. So over here on the left, if we go down through each one of these, most of the options are selected because he's got the rights to do virtually everything. So we'll close that view, leave the profile as super user, and then go ahead and click on OK. So now we have a Bob user account. If you'll notice up here under session, it indicates that we have one change, and also down here, it also shows that we have one change that's pending. So if we want that to be available so other administrators can see it, we'll go ahead and click on publish. And with that publish, now other administrators can see that information. So let's go over to security policies over here on the left. And let me go ahead and collapse all these sections, and let's expand user traffic. And let's expand to take a look at the inline layer. And let me resize this a little bit. And I'll right click on the header here. I'm just going to remove the content column just so we can see everything a little bit better. So the parent rule is looking for traffic that was sourced from any interfaces associated with the internal zone, and being routed out any interfaces associated with the external zone, any service or application, and the action is to use this inline layer, and the details of that are down below. So when the parent gets matched, it'll go ahead and start processing the child rules until there's a match. And with the match of accept, the traffic is forwarded through the firewall, or if we match on the drop rule, the traffic will be dropped, and that'll be the end of the processing, either way. So before we make any changes here, let's go to our client machine, which is client-nug. So in our lab environment, I simply clicked on client-nug on the right. If we need to re-authenticate or re-log in, we would do that. And from here, let's go ahead and launch SmartConsole. So we can do that. There's a shortcut on the desktop here. We can double-click on SmartConsole to launch SmartConsole from this second computer. And from here, once it comes up, we'll log on as Bob. So with the SmartConsole application running, we'll log on as Bob. We'll put in our lab password that we just set up for Bob, and we're connecting to the management server at .110, and we'll click Login. Great. Now that we're logged in, over on the left-hand side, let's click on Security Policies. And over here on the right, we have the Objects pane open. I'm going to go ahead and click on Objects to close that. And then we'll collapse all our sections, and let's just expand the user traffic section once again, just like we did over on DC-NUG. So we can notice a few things. Number one, we are logged on as Bob. It shows us that right here. It says that we currently have no changes that are pending because we haven't started to modify anything. And also here in the session area, it doesn't indicate that we have any pending changes. If we take a look over here in the far right in the bottom, it has a little picture of an administrator with a 1 next to it. And in the bottom right, if we click on that to bring it up, it indicates that we're logged on as Bob, and there's another administrator logged on as admin. So if we clicked on more details right here, it's showing us the administrators that are currently logged on. So we're logged on as Bob. On the other computer, we're logged on as admin. There's our source IP addresses. And currently, we don't have any changes in process, either one of us. So if we go back to security policies on the left, so logged on as Bob here, let's go up to session and click on session. And let's add some details. And for the session name, let's call it making some changes to 2.1, referring to rule 2.1. And then we can add a description if we want. That's really to help with documentation for what an individual is doing or working on in the event somebody else, another administrator, needs to identify that or look at that session. So with that in place, we'll go ahead and let's click down here on Rule 2.1. And let's modify Rule 2.1. I'm going to go ahead and push this bottom part down so it's out of the way as well. And to make a simple change, let's just change the name of this rule. Let's go ahead and double click in the name column here for Rule 2.1. And let's call this DNS and Web Updated. And if you'll notice, the moment we started making that change, it put the pencil right here to indicate that we, from this station right here, from this management session, have changed this rule or in the process of modifying this rule or this element. And then we'll press enter. And then up here in our session, it has the name of our session. It also indicates here we have a change. It also indicates down here that we also have a change that has not been published yet. So if we go over to the other computer, over on DC-NUG, where admin is logged in, admin, regarding this rule, should see a lock symbol implying that to the other user, that record is now locked. So let's go over to DCNug. So up here on DCNug, and let me just minimize SmartConsole for a moment, just to confirm where we're at. So sitting here at DCNug, and we'll bring up SmartConsole. So here we're logged on as admin. And now if we look at the Securities and Policies tab, and more specifically at Rule 2.1, we have a little lock symbol implying that another administrator has it locked. And we could just hover over that lock, and it would show us that it's locked by Bob. And if we wanted more information on that, we go to the bottom right-hand corner and click on the little icon of the administrator wearing the crown. It says we are logged in as admin. The other user is Bob. And if we clicked on more details, so we'll click on more details, which whisks us away through time and space to the Manage and Settings tab over here on the left. And then specifically under Sessions, it takes us under View Sessions. Right here, we can see Bob logged on. That's the session he's currently using. And he's currently got a lock in place, and he currently has one pending change because he hasn't yet clicked on Publish. So let's imagine that Bob fell asleep at his desk, or he walked away, or went to a long lunch, or forgot he was working on something, and that record is locked, or that element is locked. We do have some options, and one of those options is to right-click on that session. So we're currently logged in as admin. We can right-click on Bob's session, and then we have some options, including Publish and Disconnect Bob, discard Bob's changes and disconnect Bob, just disconnect Bob, or take over Bob's session. So if we want to simply take over Bob's session, we can click on Take Over. And we have a big warning message. Warning, Will Robinson, the administrator Bob is currently connected to the session. Do you want to continue to take over? So for this demonstration, we're going to say yes. Yes, we do. So we'll click on yes. Give it a few moments to think about that. And now we have a new pop-up that says Session Takeover Complete, New Session Loaded, and we'll click on OK. So here we are. We're still logged in as admin. And if we go back over to Security Policies over on the left, and we expand our user traffic rule, notice here for 2.1, we have the little pencil, and it's now us, the admin account, that has that locked. And if we want to publish that change, we could then go ahead and click on Publish, which will remove that lock and implement that change. And then furthermore, if we wanted to install the policy on the firewalls, we'd go ahead and click on Install Policy, which would then proceed to push out the updated policies to our gateways. And just for fun, if we go back over to the client NUG computer where Bob had been logged in, here we have a message saying your session was taken over by admin. So if we click on OK, it effectively restarts SmartConsole, at which point Bob could go ahead and log in again. In this Nugget and Hands-On Lab, we've created new SmartConsole user accounts. We've also identified how the checkpoint system can implement locks on objects or elements inside of our configuration to prevent multiple administrators from attempting to make changes at the same time. We've also seen the results of those locks either as a pencil by the person making those changes or by the lock icon that a second administrator would see if the first administrator has locked an object. We also identified some options for taking over or publishing other people's work, which would also release the locks. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.